Since Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D was announced, many people have wondered if it would be worth tampering with something so legendary. After all, these games practically shaped the turn-based RPG genre. But Square Enix has achieved a rare balance, preserving the original spirit while enhancing everything that made the old versions difficult to revisit today. In today's video, we're going to look at 10 things the HD-2D remake does better than the classics, and why these details make all the difference for those who love retro RPGs. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D bring a visual experience that really surprised me, especially when compared to the original Nintendo games or even the remakes that came out for the Super Nintendo. The mix of detailed pixel art with 3D backgrounds is something that brings that nostalgic feeling of classic graphics, but with a depth and visual vibrancy that didn't exist before. It's as if you could see the game world come to life around you, something that made my immersion grow a lot. What caught my attention right away was how the HD-2D style manages to enhance every element of the scenery. The forests, for example, are no longer those static green patches. They have layers that move and animate, with shadows and details that give a real sense of space and volume. This makes a huge difference, because what once seemed like a simple background now transforms into an environment that you want to explore calmly, noticing every corner. Another aspect that I really enjoyed was the representation of the mountains and other terrains that now have textures and subtle variations. Before, in the older games, it was all flatter, with few nuances to indicate relief or different types of terrain. In the remake, the three-dimensional depth and animations are so well done that you can almost feel the cold air of the mountains or the humidity of the forest just by looking at the image on the screen. I also noticed that the HD-2D doesn't overuse modernity, maintaining that classic charm of pixel art that so marks the original games. This is a balance that I admire, because they don't transform the game into something that loses its identity, but rather into something that evolves respecting its roots. For me, it's an act of love for the original game, bringing innovation without discarding the past. In addition, the lighting effects seemed super subtle to me, but capable of making a lot of difference. It's not a dazzling graphic, but with delicate lights that highlight the textures and give a sense of time of day or climate, making everything much more atmospheric. This makes the player connect even more with the journey, as the environments are not only beautiful, but also transmit sensations. The movement of the elements of the scenery, such as the swaying of the leaves or birds flying, manage to make me feel that the game world is alive, not just drawn static. This animation brings a calming and at the same time exciting effect, as it demonstrates that each part of the scenery was thought to remain interesting while you adventure through the map. This made me want to keep looking and enjoying the details even before moving on to the next battle. I feel that this graphic update puts Dragon Quest I and II on a different artistic level, capable of enchanting both old and new fans. The boldness of using the HD-2D style was not just an aesthetic whim, but a decision that enriches the experience, bringing a new dimension to a classic that already had its place guaranteed in history. It's proof that with care and technique, it's possible to renew without losing the essence that made these games unforgettable. One of the points that most impressed me in Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D was how the narrative was treated with special care to expand the original story. Those moments that, in the old games, were simple and almost mechanical, gained life with new cutscenes and dialogues that brought more emotion and depth. For me, this made all the difference because it started to transform the journey into something more engaging, not just a sequence of battles and missions, but a plot with more personality. The addition of new characters and the expansion of existing ones is something that touched me a lot, especially the Princess of Kanak, who in the old games was more of a static figure, became a character with her own voice, face, and personality. She stopped being just an objective to become a companion with whom you really have interaction, which makes the battles and dialogues much more interesting. This brought a greater emotional weight to the narrative, something that I felt was missing in the previous versions. Another detail that I found brilliant was the care placed in the small scenes that, before, passed without great prominence. Now, with the expanded cutscenes, these moments gained an extra layer of meaning. This not only helps to create a better connection of the player with the plot, but also gives a sense that each step in the adventure really matters. because you better understand the motives and feelings of the characters involved. The way the dialogues were reworked also elevated the game for me. They became more natural, with a touch of humor and emotion that didn't exist in the original. This humanization of the characters made me feel closer to the story and the challenges faced, breaking that barrier of distance that some old adventures passed due to the more direct and limited text. I thought that this attention to the amplified narrative created an experience that can please both longtime fans and those who are getting to know Dragon Quest for the first time. For those who played the originals, it's a way to revisit that familiar world, but with a renewed look, while new players have access to a richer and more captivating plot. This duality is something that few remasters manage to achieve so well. In addition, the extra events and interactions added in the game help to reinforce the growth of the characters and the world itself. This brings a sense that the universe of Dragon Quest is more alive and organic, with parallel stories and details that enrich the main journey. For me, this makes each step of the adventure more rewarding, because it no longer feels like a simple displacement between one battle and another. These improvements in the story and narrative elevated Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D beyond a simple visual remake. It's a reinterpretation that respects the original essence, but takes the risk of giving more soul and tact to the characters and events, making everything more exciting and attractive. For those who, like me, value the plot as much as the gameplay, this approach brought a new layer of charm to two already classic games. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D reformulated a classic aspect that I always found quite challenging in the originals: the battles against enemies. While in the first games of the original Nintendo, the combats were usually against a single opponent, the remake brought a system of battles against groups of enemies, which completely changes the dynamics of the game and the necessary strategy. This change seems super intelligent to me because it recognizes that the hero of the game is playing alone, and facing several enemies in the same round increases the challenge and the feeling of risk, but in a more balanced and interesting way. What makes this even better is the introduction of new spells that hit multiple targets, something that, in the classics, didn't exist or was very limited. These spells bring a new strategic layer to the solo battles, allowing the player to have efficient ways to deal with groups of enemies without needing an army of allies. This gave me a greater sense of power, of being more equipped to face the challenges, even being alone in combat. The fact that the battles now deal with multiple enemies not only expands the tactical horizon, but also makes the player have to think better about the order of actions and the choice of spells or physical attacks. Before, the battles were more linear, almost a duel, but now they are more like the battles of modern RPGs, where controlling the battlefield is crucial. This made me appreciate more the care with the design of the gameplay in this HD-2D version. I also perceive that this visual change with groups fighting helps to better represent the world of the game, where dangers and obstacles rarely appear alone. This greater sense of immersion, with enemies appearing together, brings a more palpable realism to the encounters, something that made me feel the adventure more alive and threatening, increasing the adrenaline in each combat. In addition, the presence of multiple enemies in battle opens space for the player to explore different playstyles, whether investing in area attacks to deal with the groups, or focusing on defense and healing strategies to endure longer. This range of options made the experience more interesting for me, because it encourages experimentation and constant adaptation, something that the original games sometimes didn't provide. Another point that I found cool is that the system still maintains the essential simplicity of the classic games, even with this novelty. It doesn't become a system that is too complex, which could drive away those who want the nostalgia, but it delivers an evolution that respects the original gameplay while modernizing it. This is something that I value a lot, because it shows that it's possible to innovate without losing the soul of the game. I believe that these battles with multiple enemies and area spells were a fundamental insight to balance the challenge for the solo hero, making the experience more fluid and fair. It made me relive the classic Dragon Quest in a new way, with more tactics and emotion, without losing the essence that made these games remarkable. It's a great example of how remakes can bring significant improvements in the mechanics without giving up what made the game great from the beginning. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D bring a very welcome feature that I think is essential for today's audience: the ability to adjust the speed of battles. In the old games, the time spent on grinding and repetitive battles was a barrier of patience for many people, and this option to speed up the pace makes the experience much more fluid and enjoyable. For me, this breaks a block that historically drove away players who were not willing to invest hours in slow combat. This option makes it possible to maintain the essence of classic combat, but in a more dynamic way, rigid in controlling the rhythm of the adventure. It is a feature that I value too much because it makes the game accessible to those who may no longer have so much time available to play, but still want to enjoy the story and the Dragon Quest universe without being frustrated with the slowness of the fights. Another cool point is that the adjustable speed does not interfere with the difficulty of the game, but simply reduces the time needed for the battles to happen, allowing you to focus more on exploration and narrative. This for me is fundamental, as it keeps the challenge intact, but accelerates that part that for many players is more tiring, without losing the magic of combat. I feel that this improvement helps to bring Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D closer to a wider audience, including those who have never played the classics and prefer a faster pace. This democratization of the experience is something that was missing in the original games, and now with this technology we can marry nostalgia with a more practical and modern gameplay. In addition, I thought this option is very easy to use and combine with the player's own style. You can speed up to get through routine battles faster and slow down when you want to enjoy that tactical duel. A freedom that, in my opinion, should be standard for every classic RPG remake. Overall, being able to speed up the battles made the game become lighter and less repetitive for me, allowing me to focus more on the fun and less on the tiring mechanical part, which in the old games sometimes worked as an obstacle to move forward in the adventure. This simple but powerful solution shows how a remake can respect the original classic, but give improvements that make all the perceptible difference in the player's experience, increasing the pleasure of revisiting or knowing Dragon Quest for the first time in a more modern and friendly way. The remake surprised by adding voice acting in English and Japanese in the most iconic scenes, such as the confrontation with the Dragon Lord, something that completely changes the way the story is delivered. In the original games, everything depended exclusively on static texts and written dialogues, which gave a classic touch, but that may seem cold or distant to the modern player. For me, this addition of voice brought a palpable emotional layer, making the tension and grandeur of these moments become much more evident and memorable. This choice to include bilingual dubbing shows a special care in reaching both the Western and Japanese audiences, preserving the original spirit, but allowing the emotion of the story to transcend the text. I thought it was brilliant because the interpretation of the voice actors adds personality to the characters and creatures, something that I missed in the old versions, making the confrontation with the Dragon Lord much more epic and engaging. In addition, the dubbing helps to speed up the pace of the narrative in key moments, preventing the player from being stuck long periods reading text, and keeping the attention focused on the action and atmosphere. I realized that this not only enhances the presentation, but also contributes to the accessibility of the game, giving a more fluid and dynamic experience. The auditory impact complements the improved visuals of the HD-2D, creating a very rich combination that elevates the standard of the remakes. The feeling that the world is alive does not come only from the graphics, but also from the sound, which brings nuances of emotion and drama. For me, this is what transforms a simple text game into a cinematic adventure. It is interesting to note that the dubbing is not omnipresent, being used with moderation in the most important moments, which maintains the essence of the classic RPG, preventing it from becoming an excessively loaded game or that loses its identity. This dosage only reinforces the respect that the developers had for the original material. Overall, the addition of dubbing in Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D seemed to me a significant advance that humanizes the experience more, gives more weight and emotion to the narrative, and brings that feeling of a revitalized and high-quality classic, made to mark both old and new fans. This remake brought a new meaning to the word exploration for me by including several new areas, hidden islands, and secrets on the world map that didn't exist in the original games. This not only expands the sense of adventure, but also encourages the player to stray from the predictable path and dive into discoveries that enrich the experience, making each trip across the map a new opportunity for surprise and reward. One of the things I liked most was realizing that these new areas aren't just empty expansions, but rather places full of activities, special items, and even side stories that expand the lore of the games. It's an invitation for you to really venture out and explore every corner, which brings the pleasant feeling of being on a living journey, with more elements to keep interest and curiosity awake. The use of hidden islands on the map is especially brilliant because it creates a sense of mystery, something that in the old games was limited by technology and design. Now, we can come across secret locations that make the game seem bigger and more complex than expected, with rewards for those who dedicate themselves to investigating and unraveling its mysteries. In addition, these new secrets add a touch of rewards for the most exploratory players, rewarding curiosity with powerful items, equipment, or information that helps in battles and on the journey. This seemed to me an intelligent way to balance exploration with the progression of the game, maintaining the challenge and the fun. I also felt that these additions give an important freshness to those who already know the original games, as they bring news that justifies revisiting the classic world with renewed eyes, as if it were a reissue that is worthwhile for longtime fans and new players at the same time. Another cool point is how these new areas fit well within the logic of the Dragon Quest world, maintaining thematic and narrative coherence without seeming like forced insertions. This elevates the quality of the remake, as it shows that it was not just an aesthetic work, but also a rethinking of the world and game design. These expansions have made exploration something more dynamic and rewarding, breaking the monotony of the old maps and making each step in the world of Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D a new opportunity for discoveries, an invitation that left me more involved and interested in playing until the end. Dragon Quest HD-2D features multiple difficulty modes that transform the classic experience into something more accessible for new players without failing to please old fans. This choice seems to me a brilliant solution to the problem of rigidity and old-school challenge that can drive away those who are starting. Having the option to focus on the story with adjusted difficulties allows anyone, regardless of their familiarity with the old games, to have a more fluid and less frustrating experience. I felt that these difficulty modes are fundamental to democratizing access to the game, as now it is no longer necessary to hurt yourself repeatedly thinking about the perfect strategy or in long combats to advance. For me, this makes the adventure less punitive, especially for those who prefer to get more involved with the narrative and setting than with the competitive aspect of the traditional RPG. The interesting thing is that these modes don't make the game easy in a way that loses its charm. They allow the player to choose their own way of playing. There are those who want the pure challenge of the originals, and there are those who prefer a more relaxed pace. This flexibility shows respect to different audiences and expands the appeal of the remake, something that I value a lot when I think about how to update classics for modern times. I also thought that the introduction of these difficulty levels mixes nostalgia well with modernity, as it maintains central elements of the classic game, but without the rigidity that sometimes can be an obstacle in today's world, where time to play is more limited and expectations for accessibility are higher. The fact that the easiest mode allows you to play almost without worrying about intensive grinding and complicated battles makes Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D more friendly, especially for casual players, without taking away the essence of the game for those who want to continue to be challenged at higher levels. This versatility serves for me to recommend the game to different types of audience. For me, the presence of these modes certainly makes the remake more inviting and complete, as it respects the history of the game, but does not trap the player in a pattern that can become tiring. This will be an important differential for those who want to know the saga without the frustration of the extreme difficulty that marked the original titles. These difficulty modes show how remakes can unite tradition and modernity, maintaining the essence of what makes the series special, but giving the freedom for each player to choose their own rhythm and challenge, something that I think is a necessary evolution for these classics to remain relevant. The updated soundtrack is one of the aspects that most impressed me in this remake. The new version brings a fully orchestrated soundtrack, which manages to capture the magical and timeless essence of the series, overcoming the limitations of the original 8-bit versions. This orchestration not only embellishes the game, but also makes the sound experience much more immersive and diverse, while accompanying the renewed visual and the emotions of the narrative. What pleases me most is that this orchestrated soundtrack has not lost the charm of the classic melodies that are so striking for fans of the series. On the contrary, it elevates them with modern and sophisticated arrangements that thrill both veterans and new players. The musical authenticity of Koichi Sugiyama, composer of the series, remains present, but in a format that sounds current and impactful, creating an engaging atmosphere for every moment of the adventure. In addition, the soundtrack is not just a background, but an active element that contributes to the construction of immersion and tension in battles, explorations, and important dialogues. This makes me feel that the world of Dragon Quest is more alive and full of emotion, providing a sound experience that perfectly complements the HD-2D graphics and the expanded plot of the remake. Another point that I value is that the orchestrated music creates a better connection with the grandeur of the adventure, especially in the epic moments and in the striking confrontations, such as the encounter with the Dragon Lord. This makes these moments stand out even more, reinforcing the feeling that we are participating in a legendary journey with sound worthy of the franchise's reputation. The diversity of the compositions also deserves to be highlighted, as there are themes that vary between moments of calm, exploration, tension, and victory, which avoids sound repetition and maintains the player's interest throughout the journey. This sound variety enriched my experience, making each area and situation have its own sound identity, something that I consider fundamental for an engaging RPG. The updated soundtrack demonstrates how the remake managed to unite tradition and innovation, bringing a music that respects the classic roots but also embraces modernity to offer an unforgettable sound experience. This sound quality made all the difference for me, making the remake not just a tribute, but a worthy evolution of these legendary titles. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D brings several quality-of-life improvements that completely change my experience with these classic titles. Features like mini-maps and objective markers help a lot in navigation, eliminating that feeling of getting lost or walking in the dark, something that was common in the original games and that generated a lot of frustration. In addition, unrestricted fast travel, enabled by the zoom spell, greatly facilitates travel through the open world, something that previously took a considerable amount of time and broke the rhythm of the adventure. A detail that I liked a lot is the autosave, which automatically saves progress after battles and certain events, avoiding the loss of important advances, something especially frustrating in the classics, which required much more manual management of saves. This for me is a real watershed, as it makes the game much smoother and less punitive, focusing on the pleasure of the story and exploration. Another point that caught my attention was the possibility of running instead of walking step by step. This simple change makes all the difference for the fluidity of the game, making trips across the map less tiring and more dynamic without losing the charm of the classic grid movement when the player wants. This mixture of modernity with respect to tradition is something that I liked a lot. I also thought it was cool that these updates don't make the game less challenging, but balance accessibility and nostalgia, offering a comfortable experience for new players and veterans. These adjustments are fundamental to bringing together colleagues who may be afraid of the old and robust systems of the classic RPG in general. Complementing, the management system and menus became more intuitive and responsive, making it easier to organize the inventory, spells, and equipment without breaking the immersion, which was a significant improvement compared to the rigid and slow interfaces of the originals. Other facilities, such as the system of optional indications on the map, help to keep the player focused on the plot when necessary, but without giving everything on a platter, preserving the spirit of discovery and the feeling of adventure. This is good for those who like to get lost and explore, but also for those who prefer a more linear path. The remake introduces a variety of new features that have significantly changed the traditional battles, bringing new offensive skills and strategies that enrich the combat. Now the characters can learn attacks that hit multiple enemies, or even damage reflection skills, either by leveling up or using scrolls, which adds an extra level of complexity and fun, something that pleased me a lot, especially in Dragon Quest II, where the improved party dynamics stand out. In Dragon Quest II in particular, the system has become more robust because each character has a clearer role and can learn exclusive techniques that influence battle strategies, which increases the importance of team management. These skills also have different effects, such as area attacks or more powerful attacks that consume more EMP, requiring planning to use at the right time. For me, this made the battles more varied and less predictable, maintaining interest in each encounter. Another aspect that I found sensational was the use of sigils, which add special effects to the skills, such as more frequent critical attacks or MP recovery when defending, bringing more tactics to the battles. This makes the player need to think beyond the present moment, planning strategies that range from the use of scrolls to the moment of activating special abilities called souped-up skills, which are more powerful versions of the abilities. It is also interesting how the game now encourages the player to explore the map to find scrolls that unlock new spells and techniques, bringing a touch of personalization and gradual evolution that was almost non-existent before. This complements the character progression and rewards the player's effort, making the experience more rewarding. Despite the hero of Dragon Quest I exclusively facing solo battles, the expanded skills make the combats much more dynamic and less limited, requiring good MP control and good use of attacks to defeat multiple enemies or difficult bosses. The feeling that the system has become deeper, even without losing its classic simplicity, seems to me an important achievement. For those who like to explore different tactical approaches, the remake offers the freedom to experiment and refine combinations of skills, making combat something that goes beyond repeatedly pressing the attack button. This makes the game more attractive for those who like to think about the battles while maintaining its essence accessible to newcomers. I thought that these improvements in skills and combat make Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D a much more complete and updated version without losing respect for the original structure, which offers a fun and varied challenge for both old fans and those who are getting to know the franchise now.